If you click this, your one-on-ones already feel wrong. You're leaving them drained, not developed. Most leaders I talk to believe their one-on-ones are coaching sessions. They're not. They're approval queues with a calendar invite attached. And that gap is costing your team 40 to 60% of their decision-making speed. And I have the numbers to prove it. Here's what's actually happening inside most engineering one-on-ones right now. Status reporting that could have been a Slack message. Escalation dumping. Someone hands you a problem they solved in their head but won't commit to out loud. Decision validation. Your engineer already knows the answer. They just need your signature on it. And relitigation. You already solved this 2 sprints ago, but because nobody wrote it down, you're solving it again today. That's not a one-on-one. That's a bottleneck with a recurring meeting block. I've built one-on-one structures inside of engineering orgs, scaling past 200 people. Teams at companies where smart people were still waiting on one person to move anything forward. This pattern shows up in every single one because the problem isn't your team. It's the ownership model that nobody built. By the end of this, you'll have a decision domain review framework you can run in your next one-on-one and a checklist that stops escalations from ever hitting your calendar again. But here's the one I need you to stay for. There are 5 decision domains on this matrix, and Priya almost didn't delegate one. It turned out to be the fastest win of all 5. I'll tell you which one it is before this video ends. First, let me show you what was actually breaking her team. You see, Priya runs the engineering team, and her team was sharp. Experienced people, solid instincts, no obvious skill gaps. And they were still waiting for her for everything. Not because they couldn't make decisions, but because nobody had ever defined who was actually allowed to. So they defaulted to her every time. The pattern is subtle enough that most managers, they never catch it. You ask questions, you listen, you weigh in, you call it collaboration. What your team is learning, though, is that decisions, they don't move without you in the room. You've trained them to wait by being helpful. Priya's numbers, before she changed anything, were pretty telling. Her weekly escalation count was high enough that she was fielding approval requests outside of scheduled one-on-ones, which meant the one-on-ones themselves were just the formal version of something already happening informally all week. Roadmap delays kept tracing back to the same root cause: unclear ownership. Nobody knew whose call it was, so it became hers by default. And when she actually tracked down how her one-on-one time was spent, the majority went to status updates, not coaching, not career growth, not strategy, status. The cost people underestimate here isn't the meeting time, it's decision latency. That's the gap between when a decision needs to be made and when it actually is. Sprint velocity, incident resolution time, hiring pipelines, all of it slows down when decisions are queued behind one person's availability, and that person is usually you. So what does a broken one-on-one actually look like versus a functional one? The broken version is reactive. Someone shows up, tells you what's happening, surfaces something stuck, and you either approve it, redirect it, or table it. No ownership is established, nothing is logged. The ambiguity that caused the problem stays in place for next week. An operational one-on-one looks different from the first question. Blockers are categorized before the meeting starts. Ownership is explicit and documented. Escalation thresholds are already defined, so both people know whether something belongs in the room or not. Decisions that get made get logged, and any ambiguity that surfaces gets resolved immediately rather than carried forward. The fix isn't a better agenda. It's a fundamentally different ownership model, and that's what Priya built. Priya mapped 5 domains. Each one killed a different category of dependency. Roadmap, incidents, hiring, architecture, tooling. That's the full map. When we've covered all 5, you're done. Domain 1, roadmap prioritization. When business priorities conflict and 2 things can't both ship next sprint, who makes that call? Before Priya mapped this domain, that question landed on her desk every single cycle. After mapping it, her team made more prioritization decisions within a defined set of criteria: engineering capacity, customer impact data, contractual commitments. If the answer lived inside those parameters, the team decided. If something outside those parameters required trade-offs at the business level, that's when it escalated. The trigger was explicit, documented, and shared. That one boundary removed the most common question from Priya's week. Should I escalate this? The answer was already written down. Domain 2, incident response. This is where the dependency cost shows up the fastest. Priya's team was paging her for P2s, not P0s, P2s. And the reason wasn't that they needed her expertise. Nobody had ever told them they didn't. Once she mapped severity tiers and assigned response owners in advance, leadership was only in the room for P0s. P1s and P2s had named owners, defined response windows, and a clear escalation path that only activated under specific conditions. Incident resolution timelines dropped because decisions stopped waiting on her availability. Domain 3, hiring and promotion. This is where most delays go unnoticed until they become expensive. The gap between what a team lead can approve and what needs director sign-off is usually vague, and vague gaps fill with unnecessary escalations. Priya explicitly mapped the boundary. Team leads owned hiring decisions up to a defined seniority level, and they owned promotion recommendations with documented evidence. Director sign-off was required for senior or principal level decisions and any promotion that changed the team's compensation band. That single written boundary, 1 page, 2 columns, they cut hiring approval back and forth by more than half. Because the question was never, can my manager approve this? It was, does anyone know what they're allowed to approve? And now they did. Domain 4, architectural decisions. If you've been waiting for the one Priya almost didn't delegate, this one is it. The one eating the most time. Architectural decision rights work differently because risk profiles vary widely. The tool Priya used here is an architecture decision record, or ADR. An ADR is a short document that captures the decision, the context, the options considered, and the reasoning. If an architectural decision was documented in an ADR and the change was reversible, the team owned it. If it was undocumented or irreversible and touched system-wide dependencies, it came to her. The ADR became the escalation filter, not her availability. Domain 5, tooling and vendor selection. This was the domain where engineers were losing the most time to process friction. Every SaaS trial, every new tool evaluation is routed through procurement by default. Priya set a spend threshold and a risk tier. Below the threshold and within a defined category, engineers moved independently. Above the threshold, or touching security and data handling, it escalated. That single boundary change removed a significant number of low-stakes approvals from her queue. Here's where most managers stop. They build the matrix, run it once, and go back to their old one-on-one format. Priya didn't. She rebuilt the meeting itself around the matrix. So 3 questions. What did you decide this week? What are you blocked on and why? What actually needs my sign-off and what doesn't? That third question is doing most of the work. It forces the person across from you to categorize before they escalate. And it trains both of you to use the domain map as the reference point rather than instinct. That checklist I mentioned, the one that keeps escalations off your calendar, inside the one-on-ones, she used it as a live filter. She called it the should this escalate checklist. It runs through 3 tests. Is this reversible or irreversible? Is it within budget authority or outside? Is it a routine call or does it set a precedent? If it's reversible within budget and routine, it doesn't escalate. That framework kept the conversation focused on decisions that actually required her and got everything else back to the people who should have owned it from the start. 60 days after rolling this out, Priya's approval dependency dropped by 40 to 60%. Incident resolution was faster, executive escalations were fewer, and her one-on-ones were actually covering development conversations. The homework for you is the delegation boundary worksheet. 1 column for what your team currently owns, 1 for what they should own, and 1 for what's still ambiguous. Start with the ambiguous column. That's where the bottleneck lives. One thing Priya was deliberate about, she didn't run the decision domain review with just 1 or 2 people and call it done. She rolled the same matrix out to every direct report. So ownership wasn't a bilateral agreement between her and a single engineer. It was visible team-wide. That visibility matters because the relitigation problem doesn't come from bad memory. It comes from decisions that were never logged anywhere. When the same question resurfaces 2 sprints later, a shared audit trail closes that loop before the one-on-one even starts. That domain Priya almost didn't delegate, architectural decisions, turned out to be the fastest win. Not because it was the biggest domain, because the ADR format gave her team a self-service escalation filter for the first time. They stopped waiting for her because they finally had a tool that answered the question without her. Your one-on-ones should produce decisions, not conversations. For your next one, map one domain. Write down the threshold and share it with whoever's in the room. That's the whole shift. If you want this to stop being a problem that you fix after the fact, build it into the hire. In the next video, I'm breaking down why traditional job descriptions filter out the engineers you actually want and how a job scorecard bakes those decisions into a role for day one. Subscribe, hit that bell.